I didn't sleep. I mean, my typical day would run until, I mean, I as soon as the sun would come up, right, I was awake, but my day would run until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. If, and I went days without even going to bed, right? I couldn't sleep because of the mission and then just the responsibility that I had. I reviewed every single intelligence report. I had oversight of all of our, you know, the ops. I mean, it was just the most intense experience in my life. And I had to be mentally sharp, physically sharp all the time. And it was hard because every new group that came in that rotated in or out would bring some crud in. So, you're always getting some sort of the latest like bug. So, but you still couldn't slow down. I mean, there were days I remember I was sick as a dog because I had the latest crud. You'd go to the medic, they'd give you something to just keep you going. But man, it was tough. Like, so you never could slow down, and mentally you couldn't slow down. And I'll tell you that while I was over there, we had a neighbor. This was in Northern Virginia where I was stateside. And my neighbor, she had a son who was the same age as my daughter. And she was a single mother. And we just, my wife and I had come close to them because of our kids. And before I left, I mean, she had been dealing with cancer and it wasn't looking good. And I remember right before I left, I went over to see her. She was in bed. And mind you, um, I don't remember how old she was at that point, but she wasn't very old. And she was such a genuinely good person and so ambitious. But it was not looking good. And I remember because talking to her and I just it was hard because I thought there was a good chance I may never see her again.
Mm.
And while I was over there, I got word that she had passed. And it was hard, right? But at the same time, I'm like, I couldn't process it because you can't. You literally have to turn all your attention, and especially in my role, like my whole purpose in life at that point was to get my team back alive. And I still remember the stock market was a disaster, and Leela, my wife, was calling or emailing me and telling me, "What do we do?" And I'm like, I don't have time for this. So I will tell you that at some point, it all came rushing together as a head, right? When I had some moments, right? And so as I started to leave, one, I didn't want to leave. And I remember talking to my boss because I had to fly from Kirkuk. I went down, caught a rotator flight. It's probably a C-130 down to Al Udeid. I remember meeting with him and I was telling him I'm not ready to go back. Like I still have a lot of things that I need to do. And he turns to me and he says, "Jim, you've done enough. Like I can't ask for you to do anything more. It's time for you to just, go home." And he meant that like with all sincerity, because he knew that the tempo, right? And and that's all he needed to say for me, and I just needed his approval, so to speak, that it was okay to go home. So from there, then I jump on a flight that takes me to Ramstein. Now, OSI, we're a global organization, so we have teams in Ramstein, and OSI had created what a unique program. It was a decompression program.
Mm.
So as soon as you come off the plane, you're greeted by basically a psychologist and his or her, like they may have a small staff, and they just make sure that you're comfortable. They get you fed and get you lodging. It's all rearranged to get you back, and then they say, okay, and then the next morning we're going to meet. And so I go back and I had a little bit of time, and I just remember going back to my room, and I can't believe it. It was like maybe 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, if that. And my meeting was something like 10 o'clock the next morning. And for me, I was like, seriously, 10 o'clock, when 8, right? He's like, trust me, like you'll appreciate this. Preston, I slept. Like I laid down something like 4 o'clock. I remember I had set an alarm just to be, to remind me, just in case. And it went off at something like, 9 o'clock in the morning. And I had slept straight that entire time.
Wow.
And I remember at that point, you go over and you meet with the psychologist and you talk about it. And I broke down. I get just all started coming out. And it was this cumulative stress and just the loss of life. And then my friend, my neighbor, it just, and it was just like I couldn't control it at that point. Um, I can't begin to describe how much is put on your shoulders in that environment. And so, my organization, which, I've spent whatever, 20, uh, 20 plus years, right? It's a great organization, but um, it can be unforgiving in some circumstances. And I will tell you this, if you have loss of life under your command, they don't forget it. And especially because everybody likes to be Monday morning quarterback, right? And second guess you. So you've got pressure like that, and you have pressure to perform in a war zone, and then everything is under your authority, right? So it's a lot. And then you're dealing with the loss of life because you're human too. And it all came out. So um, at that point, we finish up the session, and um, it was like 3-day decompression is what I think it was. And I remember we went sightseeing. He took me, we saw some castles, just some other things. And then I remember the base that night, there was the base theater, some movie was playing. It was a terrible movie, but it was nice. It was wonderful. Like it was quiet, it was peaceful. And I just thought it didn't seem real to be able to just watch that without the alarms not going off, the rockets, the whole deal, without someone, I having to make a decision, right? It was wonderful. Um, so anyway, I fast forward, next thing you know, I'm on a rotator flight. And I'm sorry, not a rotator flight, because I didn't go the traditional route, the way the OSI decompression program is. Then the OSI then reserves or schedules you a flight out on a commercial airlines through Frankfurt. So now I'm on a commercial airline, and and I'll tell you, like, so I had my orders, I had my ID, but it was very clear, like, have your passport. And my head was just not in the game, at that point, right? And I remember I packed my passport knowing that I needed it. And somehow I packed it. It's in my luggage. Now that I'm getting hung up like by the German customs, and they're not going to let me fly out. And ultimately, I just pleaded them. I said, look, I literally am just coming out of a war zone. My family's going to be waiting for me back in Dulles. If you really want this, we'll have to get into my luggage. But can you just cut me a break? I have my orders, I have my ID, and they waved me through. And but I remember, like, I'm like, seriously, this is what's happening, right? So, I fly back and then ultimately arrive in Dulles. And I remember going through Dulles, and I had to, because I had to pack my weapons. I literally had my M4 that I had flown over there with. And I remember going back there and the customs just like looking me up and down and like checking, getting double checked. And I just thought, man, I just came out like a war zone, not a criminal. And, there was no, and I get it, they had to do their job. But finally, I get past there and get all my stuff. And there's my wife and daughter there. And it was just, I knew at that point I was home.